Okay, once you've got your armature drawn out onto your reference, it's time to build. Take your wire and straighten out a length of wire. Just kind of keep it straight as possible. We're gonna just measure right on top of our drawing, and we'll build it from there. You want to keep at least 2 inches of wire below the feet. So a little extra is okay. You can always cut it away. So start by marking the bottom of the foot, ankles, knees, and then hip, and measure to the other side of the hip. Okay, so you can kind of measure the whole thing, or you can just slowly build. This is basically going to be your first bend right here on this hip. So to make a clean bend, you want to get your needle nose pliers and crimp it right next to your mark, so you can still see your mark. Okay, and then just bend the wire, and then you'll get a nice sharp bend. Second bend would be on this, going up to the hip. Okay, lay it right back on top. Make sure it's sitting right. Then I'll move on to the next bend. So for the head, I usually go about another head length up, and I'll mark it there, and that's where I'll bend it back down. So right now we're working on one side, and we're gonna kind of work our way to the other side and come back around. So I'm gonna make this bend there. I'm gonna set it, make sure it looks good. So I measure, mark, bend, and one step at a time, and just work my way around the figure. So once I get to this point, I can kind of figure out the rest of the length and cut it. This way it's a little bit easier to make the bends without all this wire hanging out, dragging it down. Looks pretty good. So I'm gonna make sure I mark the knees and ankles and bottom of the feet on this side too. And the main armature is pretty much good to go. We're just gonna tie it together right here where the hips are, where they crisscross, and we'll create the arm armatures to attach to the torso. Okay, once you get to this point, you're gonna take your 24 gauge wire and you're gonna pull out about 12 to 15 inches of wire. You're gonna place the wire halfway through on this hip area, and you're gonna just wind half the wire. You're gonna wind half the wire one way and the other half of the wire the other way. This way, you're dealing with a shorter wire, and it'll be easier to wind. When you wind this, take your time. Make sure it's snug, and make sure that the wire lays just one layer of wire. So don't overlap this thin wire over itself. So the ends of these wires, I always try to kind of tuck them so that in where they won't poke you. Okay, so really important because it is really painful to get stabbed by these wires. So that's how it should look, real clean, and it'll be really strong. So just like that, you know, it's not really gonna budge. But even once you get this, if there's some extra wire you don't need, you can just cut it away. Tuck in the wires, and then I'm gonna put a drip or two of super glue and just let that cure. So while this is curing, we're gonna go ahead and build the arm armature. So I usually will just kind of leave it at the fingertips. You know, I'll mark the wrist, elbows, shoulder. Won't go too far. So I'm gonna start the bend here, the shoulder. Again, I'm just gonna kind of estimate the length of what I'm gonna need and just cut a little bit extra off so that it's easier to work with. Set this back up on top, and we're really gonna be building right over this main armature, so it needs to match up with this main armature. So this. That's going to be like that. So after every bend, I'm going to just try to make sure that it's still, you know, everything's still where it needs to be. Okay, and we are going to be attaching the arm armature to the main torso right along these 2 points right here. Mark the elbows, wrists, and fingertips. Okay, so you're going to take another piece of wire. This time you're going to want it a little bit longer, so maybe about 20 inches or so. And again, we're going to kind of halfway, roughly. And just going to loop it around. One side, and then this other end. And I'm going to bring the arms out a little so it's easier to wrap. I'll bring this around this way. So I don't know if you can see, this is looped on one side, this is looped on the other. And then I'm just going to slowly do the same thing that I did with the hips. And slowly wind it up. So I'll kind of go back and forth, you know, as one side stabilizes. After a few rounds, I'll move on to the other and try to set that in place. Okay, so that looks good. And put a little bit of super glue along these points also. And we'll just let that cure a bit. So this is how you build an aluminum armature.